They say you're more likely to be struck by lightning than suffer a serious accident at an amusement park. I'm here to prove you wrong. From an influencer who stood up in a moving bumper car thinking 5 miles per hour was just for kids, to a content creator who snuck inside a haunted attraction after closing and came face to face with a train that wasn't supposed to be moving. I'm Nathan Cole, and this is Fatal Files. It was July 19th, 2014, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. The afternoon was hot and sticky under partly cloudy skies. Families packed the amusement park as long lines stretched across the park. I've looked into a lot of these cases, and usually you're looking at a tragic mechanical failure. But this one is completely different. Present that morning was 20-year-old Tyler Marshall. Tyler wasn't some quiet kid looking for a niche. He was the type of guy who always had to prove he was the smartest, toughest person in the room. He ran a tiny YouTube channel with almost 4,000 followers, but from what I gathered watching his old clips, it wasn't a passionate review site. He filmed low-effort pranks and boundary-pushing stunts, constantly chasing a viral moment that never came. He treated warning signs and park rules like personal insults to his intelligence. That day, he went to the park hoping to film new content while enjoying the summer break. Because the lines across the park were running over an hour long, the bumper car pavilion was packed, and the ride operators were rushing to cycle people on and off the grid. Now, this specific attraction used heavy, old-school cars surrounded by thick rubber bumpers, running on a massive steel floor with an electrified mesh grid overhead. Because it's a low-speed ride maxing out at maybe 5 miles per hour, the safety restraints are just simple. Loose lap belts meant to keep you from sliding around. To be honest, most people don't give these belts a second thought, but to Tyler, the entire setup was a joke. He openly mocked the teenage ride operator's safety briefing, laughing when told to keep his seatbelt fastened and stay inside the vehicle at all times. As soon as the grid powered up and the car started moving, Tyler decided a normal ride was beneath him. He wanted a dramatic thumbnail for his channel. While the other cars were uncoordinatedly slamming into each other at walking speed, Tyler unbuckled his seatbelt. He didn't just sit there unbuckled, he stood up entirely, planting one foot on the plastic seat and the other on the dashboard, waving his camera around and yelling at his friends in the other cars. What kills me about this part is that he was given a fair warning. The man in the car next to him, a father riding with his young kid, screamed at Tyler to sit down before he got hurt. Tyler just shook his head, laughed, and flashed a middle finger. He'd waited in the heat for this, and he wasn't going to let a stranger ruin his footage. He thought he had perfect balance, and he genuinely believed a 5-mile-per-hour ride couldn't touch him. But Tyler completely misunderstood the physics of momentum. And this is where a brief moment of human error turned a dumb decision into a fatal one. The teenage ride operator, assuming this was just another standard boring cycle, turned their back on the track for just a few seconds to log the line count on a clipboard. That tiny window of zero supervision was all physics needed. Tyler was standing completely upright when 2 other cars, driven by teenagers who were looking backward and had no idea he was standing, T-boned his vehicle simultaneously from opposite sides. At 5 miles per hour, a seated rider barely feels a jolt, but Tyler had 0 points of contact and a high center of gravity. The sudden dual impact violently jarred his car. Tyler instantly lost his footing on the smooth plastic. The kinetic force launched his 130-pound frame sideways, and he spilled right out of the vehicle, belly flopping onto the slick, greasy steel floor directly in the path of oncoming traffic. Now you have to understand the hidden danger here. The danger with bumper cars isn't the speed, it's the sheer weight. A standard bumper car weighs roughly 400 to 500 pounds of solid steel and rubber. When you add a driver, you have over half a ton of metal moving with massive momentum. Another rider, completely unaware that Tyler had fallen onto the track, stepped on the accelerator and drove straight toward him. Tyler's dropped camera later showed only fragments of what happened next. The heavy bumper car struck him and forced him violently into the outer steel guardrail surrounding the ride area. Witnesses later told investigators that Tyler's head and upper body took the full force of the impact against the rail, By the time the operator heard the screaming, looked up, and hit the emergency stop button, it was already too late. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Tyler died from catastrophic head and neck injuries caused by being crushed between the moving car and the fixed steel barrier. When investigators later reviewed the footage from Tyler's dropped camera and the park's surveillance, they confirmed the ride hadn't malfunctioned. Investigators concluded that Tyler's decision to stand inside the moving vehicle caused the accident, though the park later updated its ride monitoring procedures. As heartbreaking as Tyler's story was, the next tragedy proves that sometimes the danger isn't the ride itself. It's what happens when someone decides they can't wait any longer. It was August 12, 2016, in Orlando, Florida. Afternoon thunderstorms had passed earlier, leaving the air hot and humid as families filled the theme park. Melissa Kane was there with some coworkers. She was a 34-year-old single mom and a teacher's assistant who had spent years scrimping and saving just to afford this trip. Between working, raising 2 kids alone after a tough divorce, and picking up extra shifts, she rarely got a break. Melissa was also a marathon runner in training, and hearing that, it hit close to home. This was supposed to be her day. Her friends knew her as incredibly hardworking, but she was also impatient and hated standing still. Her whole life ran on a tight schedule. That afternoon, they hopped on a log flume ride. Halfway through, a sensor glitched, and the ride ground to a halt inside a dark, enclosed tunnel. Over the speakers, staff told everyone to stay seated while maintenance sorted it out. It was a routine breakdown, nothing dangerous, and usually took just a few minutes to fix. But as the minutes ticked by, Melissa started getting visibly frustrated. Security cameras caught her repeatedly checking her watch and looking toward an exit platform. After about 20 minutes of waiting, she'd had enough. The flume was still full of water, but Melissa could see a narrow maintenance ledge running alongside the channel. From where she sat, it looked like an easy path to the nearby exit platform. Despite other riders telling her to stay put, she climbed out of the log and stepped onto the ledge. Several passengers later said they thought she was simply trying to walk to the exit herself. At first, she managed a few careful steps. Then her foot slipped on the constantly wet concrete. She lost her balance and fell directly into the water beside the ride vehicle. The current immediately pulled her toward a nearby filtration intake that continued operating even though the ride itself had stopped. Looking at the schematics of these parks, it terrifies me how these massive pumps keep running in the background. Witnesses watched her struggle against the flow, but the moving water kept dragging her closer. She hit the steel intake grate feet first. From what I've read in the investigator reports, the suction instantly pinned her leg against the bars. The force was overwhelming. Emergency services were called immediately. Maintenance workers rushed over and tried to pull her out, but it's incredibly disturbing to realize that the water pressure was just too strong. The suction held her tightly against the grate, preventing her from pulling free. Employees raced to shut down the filtration system, while others tried unsuccessfully to reach her. By the time the pumps were finally switched off and workers got her loose, she had already been underwater for several minutes. Even though paramedics arrived in 8 minutes, it was too late. The autopsy later determined that Melissa drowned after becoming trapped against the intake grate. She also suffered significant injuries to her legs from the force of the suction. An investigation later found that the ride's mechanical glitch didn't cause her death. It happened because she stepped out of the boat into a restricted, dangerous area. Afterward, the park added extra barriers and fencing to keep anyone else from doing the same thing. A few months later, Melissa's co-workers ran the marathon she had been training for, wearing her race number on their shirts to raise money for a youth sports program for her kids. And personally, I find this case heartbreaking because it's so relatable. Who hasn't lost their patience sitting on a broken down ride? Now this next one started with ambition, and that can be just as dangerous. It was October 28th, 2018, at an indoor haunted ride in San Antonio, Texas. Most employees had already gone home for the night, leaving only a few security guards patrolling the property while automated maintenance systems ran their overnight routines. Enter Brandon Cruz. He was 18 years old, and like a lot of teens back then, he was convinced that one viral video could change his life overnight. And I get it, really do. His parents worked hard, his dad did overnight shifts loading trucks at a warehouse, and his mom cleaned local hotel rooms. But money was always tight. Brandon had spent years watching influencers turn a camera into a full-time career, and he wanted that for his family and himself. He worked part-time at an auto parts store after school and saved almost every single dollar to buy camera gear. His friends said he was super ambitious, energetic, and always brainstorming content. His phone was packed with notes, filming schedules, and lists of places he wanted to explore. To Brandon, success belonged to whoever was willing to do what nobody else would dare to do. That October, he started planning a new series about sneaking into places after hours and spending the night. This San Antonio haunted ride was supposed to be episode 1. It was huge inside, full of themed sets, tight backstage corridors, and hidden maintenance areas that regular guests never saw. So, Brandon and 3 of his friends bought tickets and walked into the park that afternoon just like normal guests. A few hours before closing time, they slipped behind some decorative scenery and hid out during the final security sweeps. And once the employees locked up and left, the group came out of hiding and started filming themselves exploring the dark, empty building. At first, they were just walking through empty hallways, checking out the ride equipment and filming under dim maintenance lights. But around 3:30 in the morning, Brandon saw a large decorative coffin-shaped prop sitting right next to the tracks. He thought it would make an awesome, dramatic jump scare for the video, so he climbed inside. His friends walked farther down the track to set up their cameras and catch his surprise entrance. But what Brandon didn't know was that the ride ran a daily automated maintenance cycle before the human maintenance crews arrived. Right around 4 o'clock in the morning, an empty ride vehicle entered the building as part of a routine system check. Unlike normal operating hours, it wasn't moving at ride speed. Security footage later showed the vehicle traveling at roughly 15 miles per hour while sensors and track systems were being tested. Unfortunately, the coffin prop Brandon was hiding in sat partially inside the train's clearance zone. Because the vehicle was moving quietly through a dark section of the attraction, and because the building's ventilation system created a constant background hum, neither Brandon nor his friends realized it was approaching. His friends later told investigators they never even heard the vehicle coming over the loud roar of the building's ventilation fans. And that detail alone keeps me up at night. No warning, no time to react, nothing. As the vehicle rounded a blind corner, it struck the coffin prop head-on. The impact wasn't dramatic enough to destroy the structure instantly, but it was powerful enough to shove the heavy prop several feet into a nearby support frame. Brandon was trapped between the moving vehicle, the prop, and the fixed structure. The ride safety system immediately detected the obstruction and automatically stopped the vehicle within seconds. But the crushing injuries had already been catastrophic. By the time Brandon's friends ran over, the train had stopped. One called emergency services while another ran for security. Paramedics got there in about 11 minutes, but Brandon was already gone. The medical examiner confirmed he died instantly from severe crush. Injuries to the chest, neck, and head caused by being pinned between multiple heavy structures. When investigators looked into it, they found the ride worked exactly the way it was programmed to. There were no mechanical failures. The official ruling was that it was a tragic accident caused by trespassing into a restricted zone. After the accident, the park added more overnight security and put up tougher barriers around backstage areas. But for Brandon's family, seeing those unfinished plans on his phone was the absolute hardest part. The video that was supposed to launch his dream channel ended up being the only thing people remembered him for. This one really hits hard because it's a tragedy born out of pure hustle. Brandon wasn't trying to vandalize anything or cause trouble. He was chasing a dream. The next victim was celebrating how far he'd already come. Before we get into the next story, if you're enjoying the video, hit subscribe. Trust me, we've only scratched the surface. Some of the most unbelievable and preventable deaths are still ahead. It was June 24th, 2017, at a mountain zipline attraction outside Glenwood Springs, Colorado. The morning was clear and dry as the attraction operated on its normal summer schedule. For Derek James, who was 29, this wasn't just a fun weekend trip. 5 years earlier, he weighed nearly 400 pounds. Through sheer hard work, diet changes, and constant hiking, he'd managed to lose over 100 pounds. He'd been documenting the whole transformation online, gaining a modest following that cheered him on. This zipline excursion was supposed to be another victory lap, and with him was his 26-year-old girlfriend, Emily Collins, a veterinary technician who had been his rock through the whole weight loss journey. While Derek loved sharing their life online, Emily was much more low-key and practical, usually staying behind the camera to support him. The attraction's main event was a massive tandem zipline that crossed a deep valley. Because of how the braking system worked, the ride had a strict combined weight limit. Based on the ride's design, heavier riders built up more momentum and required additional braking distance at the landing platform. Unlike the other park's attractions, this ride is different. Guests weren't weighed on a scale before every ride. Instead, riders were asked to provide their weight during check-in, so staff could match them to the correct line and braking setup. To me, trusting people to be honest about their weight when their lives depend on it is just crazy. But that's exactly what they did. When it was time to check in, Derek made a choice that changed everything. Wanting to avoid embarrassment and worried they might not be allowed to ride together, he reported a weight significantly lower than his actual weight. Emily trusted the number he gave and had no reason to question it. Staff entered the information into the system and cleared them for launch. Derek's helmet camera later captured him joking about finally getting to do the ride after all. They did a short practice run, and everything actually looks fine. According to witnesses, Derek was very excited. He was talking about how great the footage was going to be for his followers. When they launched off the main platform, they accelerated down the cable just like normal. What nobody realized was that the landing crew had configured the braking system and recovery procedure using the weight Derek reported, not his actual weight. The discrepancy wasn't enough to create problems on the shorter training line, but it became much more significant on the attraction's longest and fastest crossing. About halfway across the valley, staff at the landing platform noticed the pair were carrying far more speed than expected. The braking system activated normally, but the setup had been calibrated for a substantially lighter load. Investigators later determined that the heavier than expected combined weight reduced the system's safety margin and left too little distance for the crew to safely manage the landing once the error became apparent. They slammed into the terminal structure at high speed. The impact threw them forward violently inside their harnesses. Derek hit his head on the structural steel, while Emily suffered severe chest and torso trauma. Bystanders called emergency services immediately, and paramedics arrived in about 12 minutes. Sadly, Derek was already unresponsive and died shortly after reaching the hospital. Emily was still fighting for her life when help arrived, but she tragically passed away during emergency treatment. The coroner later confirmed that both died from massive blunt force trauma. After the crash, state investigators found that the attraction's weight verification procedures were inadequate and cited the company for safety deficiencies related to rider screening and landing operations. The company later faced civil lawsuits from both families and was required to overhaul its operating procedures, including mandatory weigh-ins for all riders. What happened to Derek came down to one small choice. Now, the next story is another reminder that even good intentions can end in tragedy. It was May 9th, 2015. A traveling carnival set up at a fairground just outside Dayton, Ohio. It was a warm, dusty afternoon, and by sunset, the midway was packed with families and long lines for the big rides. Among the crowd was 24-year-old Jordan Pike. Jordan worked a grueling, physically demanding job loading freight trailers at a warehouse, which usually kept him up all night. Despite the exhaustion, he loved carnivals and rarely missed one in the area. But Jordan wasn't just there to ride, he was there to film. His younger brother suffered from terrible motion sickness and couldn't handle rides at all. Years earlier, Jordan started recording first-person ride videos so they could watch them together at home. And that's one of the most thoughtful things I've heard in a long time. The channel wasn't popular, but Jordan didn't care. It was just a way to share these experiences with his brother. That night, Jordan wanted to film the carnival's biggest spinning ride, which was famous for its fast rotations and intense, sudden changes in direction. Because handheld cameras weren't allowed, Jordan smuggled in a small action camera attached to a homemade bite mount, holding the setup between his teeth. The ride manufacturer explicitly warned against loose objects, and the staff checked everyone. But Jordan figured that since his hands were free, it would be safe. According to friends who were with him, one of them even joked that putting a hard plastic mount in his mouth on a ride like this sounded like a terrible idea. Jordan laughed it off and said he'd used it before without any problems. He managed to slip past the operators without anyone noticing. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Jordan strapped in. The ride started up, and for the first minute, everything was normal. His camera recorded him laughing and talking as the ride accelerated, but once the ride hit full speed, it executed a sudden, whip-like reversal. The violent force snapped Jordan's head sideways. Witnesses later said they saw something fly from his face. The homemade bite mount had broken loose from his mouth. The camera and mount didn't fly harmlessly away. Because they were still attached by a short tether Jordan had improvised himself, the camera whipped back toward him at high speed like the end of a slingshot. The hard plastic housing struck him directly beneath the jaw and along the side of the neck. Riders sitting nearby later reported hearing a sharp cracking sound before Jordan immediately went limp in his seat. At first, nobody understood what had happened. The ride kept spinning while Jordan sat motionless, restrained upright in his seat. Other riders assumed he had passed out from the ride itself. By the time the attraction finally stopped, Jordan had completely lost consciousness. An operator noticed he wasn't responding and called for help, while an off-duty nurse in the crowd rushed over to assist. Paramedics arrived within minutes and transported him to a nearby trauma center. Despite emergency surgery, Jordan died several hours later. The coroner later determined that the camera impact had fractured structures in his upper neck and severely damaged a major artery supplying blood to his brain. The injury triggered a catastrophic stroke and massive internal bleeding that doctors could not stop. State inspectors found absolutely nothing wrong with the ride itself. Investigators concluded that the unauthorized homemade camera mount created a dangerous projectile that became lethal once the ride reached full operating speed. Months later, Jordan's younger brother found the footage from that night, everything recorded right up until the accident. He uploaded Jordan's final ride video to their shared channel, but after the family grew uncomfortable with the attention surrounding the tragedy, the video was eventually removed. And I have to be honest, I don't know how I feel about that. Part of me understands why he did it, but part of me just aches for that kid.